Welcome to The Explainer. I'm absolutely thrilled you're here today because we are diving headfirst into a massive paradigm shift in mental health. We're going to see how therapy isn't just about talking or venting your feelings, it's actually a literal, physical, biological intervention that changes your brain's anatomy.
Think about that for a second. What if words reshape your brain just like a scalpel? It completely flips everything we thought we knew about healing. We usually box medication into the biology category and talk therapy into something purely psychological or kind of ephemeral. But the reality? Words, human connection, sudden insights, they're all tangible biological tools, hitting the exact same neurochemical networks that a drug or a surgeon's scalpel might target.
Section 1. The Mind-Body Illusion, Rethinking Dualism. To really get into this, we have to ditch a really old philosophical trap. This dates way back to the 17th century philosopher René Descartes, who artificially split the mind, which she pictured as some sort of floating spirit, from the physical body. And unfortunately, this outdated idea still messes with our modern language today, especially when we try to separate psychiatric illnesses from neurological ones. And this comparison perfectly captures just how absurd that division is. I mean, nobody in medicine runs around talking about lung respiration dualism or kidney filtration dualism. It just sounds totally silly. Breathing is simply the mechanical process that lungs do. Well, in that exact same way, the mind is simply the ongoing dynamic process performed by the physical brain. Emotional struggles are not some mystical battle. They are deeply physically rooted in how your brain's networks adapt to the world.
Section 2, Brain Wiring and Neuroplasticity. So, to truly understand how therapy changes the brain, we first need to look at how the brain actually builds itself. It does this through an absolute biological marvel known as neuroplasticity. This is the brain's lifelong ability to constantly reshape its own physical structure in direct response to your lived experiences.
When we're kids, our brains start out with just massive chaotic potential. A baby is born with over 100 billion neurons, with countless overlapping connections. But to make sense of all that noise, the brain uses a subtractive process. Unused connections are literally pruned away over time through programmed cell death, or apoptosis. It's exactly like a master artist chiseling a highly detailed statue out of a giant block of marble. Only the most useful, efficient pathways are allowed to survive.
Then, as we enter adulthood, that massive pruning slows down and our learning shifts to something called Hebbian modification. Basically, repeated simultaneous neural activity physically strengthens the bonds between brain cells. On the flip side, neurons that fire out of sync gradually lose their connection. Or as the famous saying goes, neurons that fire together wire together. That isn't just a catchy metaphor, you guys. That is the literal physical mechanism for how you learn, remember, and build lifelong habits.
Let's look at how that actually plays out with something simple, like a pancake. You don't possess one single pancake neuron sitting in your head. Nope. Instead, individual neurons for the smell of melting butter, the sight of a golden circle, the taste of sweet syrup, and the warm feeling of a lazy Saturday morning with your grandma, they all fire together repeatedly. Over time, they weave together into a unified biological pancake network. Eventually, just smelling butter is enough to light up that entire network and trigger the whole vivid memory.
Section 3. Stress and Learning, Hijacking the Brain. Which brings us to a really tough question. What happens when this incredible adaptive learning mechanism is forced to run in toxic or abusive environments? Because your brain doesn't just wire up pleasant things like pancakes, it wires together whatever it experiences consistently, no matter how damaging. Chronic stress, especially from adverse childhood experiences, creates a massive biological burden known as allostatic load. When you're constantly exposed to inescapable stress, like poverty, abuse, or neglect, your body is flooded with cortisol and adrenaline. Now, adrenaline is great if you're running away from a literal tiger, but chronic exposure, it fundamentally impairs your brain's ability to learn adaptively. It forces your biology into a panicked survival mode instead of nuanced learning. So, trauma essentially miswires the brain. It accidentally glues completely innocent cues to severe survival responses. If a child goes through recurring trauma, and let's say a specific brand of cologne happens to be in the room, the neurons detecting that smell fire at the exact same moment as the neurons triggering intense terror. They wire together. Years down the line, catching a whiff of that cologne on a total stranger triggers a biological panic attack, even though you are perfectly safe.
Honestly, this completely reframes conditions like panic disorder, phobias, and PTSD. If you suffer from these, I really want you to know it's not a character flaw. It is not a broken mind. It's actually your neuroplasticity doing exactly what it evolved to do: keep you alive. It effectively won the survival game in a toxic environment, and now it's just running an outdated software program in a safe environment.
Section 4. Prediction networks and updating models. Let's see how this ties into the brain's main gig. Your brain isn't just passively reacting to the world. It is a massive, always-on prediction machine, constantly trying to guess exactly what you'll need next to survive and thrive. One of the most important prediction engines you have is the default mode network, or DMN. This kicks into high gear when your mind is wandering, reflecting on the past, or planning the future. It constantly synthesizes context to predict your needs, but throw toxic stress into the mix and those predictive models get heavily distorted. Instead of planning a healthy future, a traumatized DMN can trap you in endless loops of negative rumination, which is a core physical feature of depression and anxiety.
To update these complex predictions, the brain relies on specific chemical messengers. And we've got to bust a major myth here. Monoamines like serotonin and dopamine are not simply happiness buttons. Dopamine doesn't just mean reward. It helps your brain predict what actually has motivational meaning. Serotonin helps you interpret important environmental cues. These are highly sophisticated neurophysiological tools that help your internal networks rewrite their underlying predictions about the world.
Section 5. Biological surgery. How therapy rewires. So, knowing that trauma and mental illness are tangible physical changes in your brain's networks, we can finally grasp how our treatments actually heal the brain. Because if the physical brain can be miswired by experience, it can absolutely be rewired by experience. This is exactly why psychiatric meds and talk therapy are so incredibly powerful when used together. SSRIs don't just cure depression by filling up some low tank of serotonin. By keeping serotonin available longer, they literally create an environment in the brain that's highly ripe for neuroplasticity. They basically crack open the window for change. But psychotherapy provides the crucial new learning required to actually rewire the connections. The medication makes the brain flexible, but the therapy does the structural sculpting. And we can literally see this physical process happening. Modern brain scans clearly show us that therapies like cognitive behavioral therapy directly reduce hyperactivity in the brain's fear centers, like the anterior cingulate cortex. With VR exposure therapy, as patients safely confront their fears, you can watch their amygdala response visibly cool down over time. The therapy forces the neurons to unlink the innocent trigger from the fear response. It proves that targeted learning physically alters your anatomy. Take this fascinating example, which might seem purely psychological at first glance. Roughly 20% of psychiatric inpatients with schizophrenia deal with psychogenic polydipsia, which is excessive, highly dangerous water drinking. It sounds like a bizarre psychological mystery, right? But imaging shows it's actually a physical failure in the brain's internal interoceptive prediction networks, specifically the insula. The physical brain is just failing to accurately predict the body's need for hydration. Understanding the biology here completely removes the stigma and paves the way for super precise treatments. I want to leave you with this final, powerful thought that really shatters the mind-body divide forever. You are not stuck with the brain you have today. Every single new experience, every challenged thought, every moment of guided therapy is an active biological intervention. Through the biology of psychotherapy, you literally possess the incredible power to surgically reshape your own mind. Think about that. Thanks so much for joining us for this explainer, and we'll see you next time.